What's cracking, guys? Your boy Daniel here from Stack Strength. Today we're going to talk all about carbohydrates. Do you need them? What function do they actually serve in your body? How do they affect performance? And what are some of the drawbacks of removing carbohydrates or having a very low carbohydrate diet? Now, carbohydrates essentially provide glucose, which is your body's preferred energy source. This is then converted into a usable form of energy, and it serves a variety of different functions throughout the body. So again, your brain needs it, your muscles need it. There's a whole host of different functions that are really important. Now, some common examples are things like starches, fruits, sugars, grains, vegetables, dairy products, a whole host of different things that are in most people's general diet, especially Western diet. Now, a lot of the times people seem to think that resistance training doesn't actually have a major impact on affecting muscle glycogen stores. So again, when we eat carbohydrates, that is stored in a lot of places, but one of them is your muscles, and we store that as what's called muscle glycogen. And resistance training is generally thought to not really impact these stores all that much, but this actually isn't true. In fact, research has shown that roughly one resistance training session can reduce your muscle glycogen stores by up to 20 to 40%. This is a massive reduction. And even more recent research has shown that even a modest decrease in muscle glycogen stores can have a significant impact on subsequent performance in a negative way. So carbohydrates are really important for performance. Restricting carbohydrates results in impaired performance basically across the spectrum of sporting events. We're not just talking about powerlifting here. We're talking about strongman, we're talking about Olympic weightlifting, we're talking about cycling, swimming, running, other endurance-based activities, football. So there's a variety of different things that carbohydrates are really, really important for from a performance standpoint. Now, during high-intensity exercise, muscle glycogen is the primary energy source. In fact, one paper even found that glycolysis provided roughly 80% of the ATP demand from one set of elbow flexion taken to failure. Now, ATP is adenosine triphosphate. This is required for very, very high output type activities. So this is something you're going to be utilizing if you're an Olympic weightlifter, if you're a powerlifter, if you're a strongman athlete or a sprinter. Very, very high output, short burst, short duration intensity of exercise. So it's really important to understand that carbohydrates play a very significant role. Now, does this mean that you can't be on a ketogenic diet or else you're going to see zero gains? No, it doesn't. You can absolutely continue to see progress in strength, in your physique, in a variety of different activities, even if you are on a very low carbohydrate diet or aren't consuming carbohydrates at all. It's just that you will see impaired performance. So it's not going to be as good as if you were to actually consume a diet a little bit higher in carbohydrates. So low muscle glycogen significantly reduces work capacity. I know there's one study that actually found a significant drop-off in terms of reps performed in the squat at roughly 80% of one rep max. And this is obviously can kind of be extrapolated out to some of the other activities. So you're looking at squat, bench press, deadlift. Other activities where we're pressing heavy loads can be significantly impacted by low carbohydrate availability. Carbohydrate restriction also has been shown to impair running performance and endurance-based performance and work capacity. So carbohydrates are also important for cognitive function. Like I mentioned earlier, or I think I mentioned earlier, carbohydrates are your brain's actual preferred energy source. So if we start reducing carbohydrates to extremely low values, we can start to feel this sort of like cognitive fog. And this is something that people who are going onto a ketogenic diet experience very, very often when they're making that transition from, primarily utilizing carbohydrates to utilizing fat as their primary energy substrate. They kind of experience this mental fog a little bit. And so it's not really pleasant. I personally have never gotten past that, but I know a lot of people have experienced it when they, try and adapt to a ketogenic style diet. Now, recommendations for carbohydrates are roughly 4 to 7 grams per kilogram of body weight. Now, this is a very, very large range. It's going to depend on a lot of things. If you're a sedentary individual, this is really going to depend. You probably are not going to need a whole lot of carbohydrates. You may not even want tons of carbohydrates. But if you are very active, if you're an endurance athlete, you're going to require way more carbohydrates probably than a powerlifter will. If you are a powerlifter, or maybe a hybrid athlete. So all of these things are going to be factored into your decision and where you may fall on that spectrum of what the optimal carbohydrate consumption is for you based on your lifestyle, based on your sports, based on your level of activity, and a whole host of different things. Now, prioritizing carbohydrate consumption around your training is pretty important. You also want to make sure that the type of carbohydrates you're consuming aren't very high in fiber and they're not really, really starchy, because if that's the case, it's actually going to slow down gastric emptying. Now, if you're eating carbohydrates before your training, this can actually give you a little bit of a stomach ache and cause some GI distress during a really intense training session. It's also important to understand that if you are consuming carbohydrates during your workout, this can be really beneficial. It can help maintain blood sugar levels and keep them nice and stable through your training, so you actually feel a whole lot better. Performance-wise, you're probably not going to see any sort of boost, but you might just feel a little bit better, which absolutely can have an indirect impact on performance. Now, it's also important that if you are consuming carbohydrates, we're talking about very simple carbohydrates. So you're looking at maybe having some water with a little bit of sodium and some dextrose powder or something like that, something that you're kind of sipping on. Do not chug it, or again, you do risk having some GI distress because we're slowing down gastric emptying, and you want to make sure that you're not having that full stomach or feeling like all sloshy inside your stomach as you're going for a big heavy squat or deadlift. So hopefully that makes sense, you guys. I hope you guys got some value from that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.